Uber and Lyft drivers, what's your most NSFW story? Picked up this very tall and somewhat muscular-looking girl carrying what looks like a tackle box. She was dressed somewhat risque. Gets in the car and I said hello. She responds with a pretty deep voice. We started the trip and she was telling me that she was on her way to do makeup for one of her friends and her phone rang. She answered the call and it started off pretty standard. I wasn't really paying attention. Suddenly, I just hear, "Girl, what are you worried about? You have a great-looking pussy." All right then. Where's this going? No, Derek is super sweet. It'll be fun, I promise. No, girl, he's just going to come through the doors. Yes, I'll be there. I'll be outside the doors as one of the topless guards. Anyway, he's going to pan through doors. Focus in on you on the bed. Just start playing with yourself. Nothing you haven't done before. Yes, after a few minutes of doing that, you call for the guards, and I come in and we duck. And that's the story of the person planning their adult film during an Uber ride. Story 2. We have a driver here who has been advertising on Craigslist and has his girlfriend ride in the back seat and arranges specific pickups so she can give you a hand job during your trip. Story 3. My friend told me about a couple who got into his car. They were slightly drunk, talking nonsense to each other, so he didn't pay much attention, just kept driving and occasionally checking on them through the rearview mirror. Eventually, the girl got quiet, so he checked in the mirror and didn't see her. And my innocent friend thought she was asleep and even laughed about it with the guy. Well, not long after that, he passed a speed bump and heard the guy saying, "Oh crap!" At the same time, a gurgling sound was heard and a smell of booze plus sour filled up the whole car. So yeah, the girl was due BJ, her boyfriend. The speed bump caused her to vomit all over the back seat, and my poor friend still had to drive around with a vomit-smelling car. At least they rated him 5 stars. Story 4. Not me, but a friend who also drives in my city picked up this drunk girl on her bachelorette at 8 p.m. on a Saturday night. She was going like 4 blocks, but was so drunk she passed out the second she sat down. He pulls off, and about 30 seconds later, she craps in her sleep. She's wearing very short shorts, so it just falls out both sides. Being that she's passed out, he drives her to her hotel anyway, with the windows down, trying not to vomit. When he gets there, she kind of wakes up, and in the process of getting out, manages to smear crap on his back seat, on the back of the front seat, on the inside roof, on the outside roof, and on the door. She says sorry, throws him $20, and disappears. Uber gives him $250 to clean his car, charged to the crapter. The next day, he gets an email from Uber saying she called them all pissed off because why did she have to pay a soilage charge when she already gave him $20 to get the car cleaned? Story 5. Wasn't really NSFW, but on my second day doing Uber, one of the clients was on house arrest, Dave. Dave was a cool guy. He wanted me to buy him some wine and smokes from the gas station. He even trusted me with his card puss pin. When I get back, I decide to just have a smoke with him. That turns into us doing Tai Chi in his backyard at 2 a.m. Really cool dude, Dave was. Hope he turned his life around. Story 6. Same friend, 3 occasions over a year. 1. Guy was drunk and pulled his pants off and started playing with himself. 2. Girl decided she was happy and pulled her top off for her other friend that wasn't so drunk to feel her up. Friend apparently flipped out. 3. Guy passed out drunk, so he checked and his pulse was low. Took him to the hospital. Turned out the guy was overdosing and he saved his life. Story 7. I picked up a client who said he was on his way to the hospital to get something removed. It was very clear by his movements that he had something stuck inside of him. I asked if he needed an ambulance instead, but he said he didn't have insurance, so he couldn't afford it. After I dropped him off and helped him in, I got back in the car and looked back to find a red liquid on the seat. Story 8. I was in Santa Ana, say looking for a guy I was supposed to pick up. He lived in a large cul-de-sac with a small park in the center. It happened to be later in the evening when I went to pick him up. I go through the cul-de-sac once pretty slowly as I can't find his house. I decided to do a second round of the cul-de-sac. And when I get a quarter of the way through, 2 guys emerge from the park, and one of them pulls out his pistol and asked, "What the heck you doing in my neighborhood?" I decide to act really calm and just let him know that I'm with Uber and was unable to find a passenger and who I was looking for. He says, "Oh, you looking for a random name? He's at the top of the cul-de-sac blue house." I thanked him for his help and canceled on my rider. Damn that crap. Story 9. Not exactly NSFW, but definitely my favorite story. I picked up a couple in their 30s on St. Patrick's Day this year at 2 a.m. They wanted to take about a 35-mile drive, so I was about to give the 3rd highest paying fare I'd ever given. Great way to end the night. They had clearly been drinking like they were 20-somethings since early in the day. The wife, in the front seat, was super apologetic for the first 5 minutes or so, completely embarrassed about their level of intoxication, while the husband, in the back, was trying to be my new best friend. After 5 minutes or so, though, the Sandman paid them a visit, and they both passed out. I drove for the next 20 minutes in relative peace. When we arrived in their driveway, the husband was sound asleep, and they had a half-inch of wet snow in their driveway, so I took the wife inside first. While on the way in, she upended her purse in the snow, but I was more focused on getting her safely inside. Once we got in, I helped her to the bathroom and then went to the garage to get a snow shovel. I cleared a 4-0 wide path from the garage to the car so I could get the husband inside. He's a bigger guy, and I wanted to be safe, and finally got him awake. I gave him my shoulder and got him inside. He begged me, "Please just get me to the recliner. I can't make it to bed." So that's where we headed. All the while, the wife is throwing up with the force of a small waterfall in the bathroom. I ran outside and grabbed the contents of her purse, which included her phone, absolutely soaked at this point, and came back inside. She begged me to rice her phone, so I started to dig through her cupboards for a bag and rice. While digging, I came across their meds and pulled some Advil, absorbed by kidneys, for them. I riced her phone, then gave them both Advil and water and told them to take more in the morning. They were going to need it. Then I locked the door and showed myself out. In the end, I was dropping them off for well over half an hour, but the fare was awesome, and the day was my second best day of driving, so it didn't really bug me. The kicker? They left me a 5-star review the next day. "Pretty okay, guy. Best ride ever. Obligatory healthcare provider." Story 10? Not a driver, but a story told to me by a driver after dropping off his previous passengers. This was when I was at uni. I couldn't bother waiting for a bus home, so I hired an Uber. Luckily, there was a guy nearby dropping off a guy and a girl. I knew them, still FB friends with them. They got out and I got in. I said hi to them and chatted for a few seconds. They said they were going to study for a bit, then go to the library to meet up with her boyfriend. I was tired, so I just told them to have fun and I'd see them in class the next day. The driver overheard most of this talk and said he was surprised the girl had another boyfriend. I asked why, and he said she and the guy who was just with her were being very flirty, touchy, and kissing on the way over. I was gobsmacked a little, saying, "No, that's impossible." I laughed a bit and told him he must have imagined it. He said no. He saw them being very affectionate with each other. I'm just sitting back there shocked and not knowing what to say. He said, "I'm sorry to tell this to you, but your friend might be kind of an escort if she's cheating on a boyfriend. I'm still trying to process what I've been told." A little while later, he drops me off at home. Before I get out, I tell him, "I'm sorry I seem a bit shocked, but my friends, the guy and girl you just dropped off at the uni, they're brother and sister." He was like, "Duck off, you serious?" Almost as shocked as I was. I wasn't completely sure whether what the driver told me that day was the truth or not. For a while, I convinced myself he was bullcrapping me and knew they were brother and sister. But I noticed other stuff afterwards that kind of confirmed it. Story 11. Once picked up a guy and 3 girls. Turned out the guy was a pimp, and the girls were escorts. And the 4 were being tailed by the cops for illicit escorts. And my friend was forced to involve. Long story short, they got stopped by the cops. And my friend explained that it was his birthday, and they were going to a group sex for his birthday. And no sex for him. He did get a nice tip, though. Story 12. Picked up a handful of drunk high school kids at 2 a.m. They just finished their graduation party, and they were hammered. One of them threw up in the back. We had to stop on the side of the highway for him. To get everything out of his system, he went behind the bush and did a number 2, but he didn't have any tissue. It was damn disgusting the whole way. Puke and crap are a surprisingly nasty combination. Story 13. I work for a company similar to Uber. Oftentimes, you have to play therapist for drunk customers. They will lay out very personal details about their lives to you. One customer told me about how her ex-husband has been hospitalized several times due to complications from alcoholism, and that they told him that the next time he comes in, he'll likely pass. She told me that she really hopes that the father will pass before her 17-year-old son turns 18 because she doesn't want him to have the responsibility of having to decide to pull the plug. Another ride started with the customer asking if I played Overwatch. And within 5 minutes, she was crying and telling me about her friend who ended her life. One ride? I couldn't find the window button, and we drive the customers home in their own cars. So the customer reached over for it, very clearly moving her hand across my junk on the way. She also refused to sign her check unless she could write her number on my arm, and slapped my ass as I walked away. Another customer asked me for change, and I handed it to him as his other hand was on his junk, peeing in his front yard. Another customer, whose car interior was absolutely covered in cigarette ash and butts, told me about how her daughter recently got unmet by her boyfriend. Story 14. A few months ago, this lady came into my car whilst busily talking on her phone. "Yeah, you can't tell anyone on the team yet." No, I haven't told anyone at all. I was secretly eavesdropping, as I usually do, trying to figure out what kind of job she had. The details are kind of gruesome. The poor thing was lying there for a while after it happened because there was no one around. These gits took everything from her and tried to steal her car, but they apparently hit her. It was only a couple hours later someone saw it and called us. She was still alive when we got there. "Hey, listen, I gotta go. We'll talk more soon." We had reached her destination, church. She got out of the car with a quick thank you. Story 15. If it counts, 20 plus years ago, I drove for a sedan service. I picked up one of the guy and took him to get substances and an escort. It certainly wasn't safe for my work at the time, but everything worked out okay. He came out of a luxury resort and gave me a sketchy address. When we arrived, it was an abandoned convenience store, so he told me he was looking for some company. Yeah, I knew where to find that, and along the way, He said he was looking for some medicine, too, so we stopped and got him something to smoke. Could have been substances or anything. I don't know, and I didn't ask. After being told, "Damn you, cop," more than once, we found a pretty young lady of the evening. He asked where she's been all night. She said she's been right there waiting for him. She got in the car. They kissed and do BJ in the back seat on the way back to the resort, and he gave me a decent tip. Story 16. I did a little over 500 trips for Uber last year, and the only thing remotely NSFW I experienced was this really hot girl asked me to zip up the back of her dress when I picked her up. That was cool. Story 17. This one isn't really NSFW, but it's the reason why I stopped working for Uber. It's about 10:30 p.m. I get a request and accept it. It's a 20-something-year-old girl just getting off work at a retail clothing store. She needs a ride to her home, about 35 minutes outside the city limits. Cool, long ride, more money. Get to her house. She gets out and I drive away. Now, I'm about 25 miles away from the city, so I don't really expect to get any hits out there. I'm about to head back in when I get another request. This one is another 30 minutes further outside the city limits. Maybe this person wants to go downtown. That's an hour-long ride, it's money. I'm down. Start heading their way. It's a beautiful night, so I cruise the whole way with my windows down. Long, winding, narrow roads, no streetlights for miles. Finally, I come across the property. It's a ranch-style place. I turn in. Still no lights. Pitch black. I drive in for about 2 miles with no signs of a house. I'm doubting my GPS at this point. Oh well, I'm already this far. Keep going. Oh cool, a house. No lights on. Something doesn't seem right. I swing my car around to face the exit, leave my car and drive, and rest my foot on the brake just in case, and waited for a while. Nothing. Let me give the guy a call, he answers. Sounds confused. Hey, I'm your Uber driver. I'm outside. Take your time. I'm here whenever you're ready. Uber? I didn't request a ride. I'm at Texas. Your address and information comes up on my app. Texas? I'm in Indiana. I've never been to Texas. Please don't charge me. Hangs up. In that moment, I felt the already pitch black night get darker. I turned down the radio. My window was still open, and so I started listening. You know that sound of a dirt road when somebody is walking on it? How it crunches and you can hear every step? Imagine that sound. But there are 2 sets of feet, and they're running, getting louder. I look out my rearview mirror, and the only light is from the red parking lights of my car. 2 men, all black clothes painted red by my brake lights, sprinting, getting closer, getting louder. I slammed on the gas. My car threw pebbles and rocks at them as I semi-burned out, and I hauled ass as fast as I could out of that property. Got back on that winding road, followed it all the way to a well-lit gas station, shifted to park, and sat there, stunned. What just happened? I tried following up with Uber. Nothing really came of it. To this day, I'll always have to wonder what happened that night. Story 18. Only ever Ubered once. Picked up a couple that had been making out as I pulled up, and the entire time driving, she kept saying how they were going to smash. Dude, definitely got lucky that night. Story 19. Not an Uber driver, but I did drive for a taxi company. I had a fare where 2 drunk people who were making out in the back of my cab. This isn't unusual on its own. Happens quite often. Just gotta stop them before crap gets out of hand. Well, one of them decides to stop making out and says to me, "Don't tell anyone, okay?" Curious, I ask why. He responds, "We are cousins and we don't want our family to find out." Then they went back to making out again. I didn't once think they could have possibly been cousins. Never saw either people before or after. Could have just kept his mouth shut and I'd never have known. Why would you disclose that information to a stranger? Story 20? This wasn't me. And it isn't NSFW, but I think it's worth sharing. One driver told me that one time this guy got in his Uber without putting in the destination. This guy was in his mid-40s, wearing an all-black suit and wearing sunglasses. Didn't take them off. He also had a briefcase that he put on his lap. Anyway, so he sits in the car and points forwards. So the driver takes off. They didn't speak the entire journey. It was about 40 minutes. To tell the driver where to go, the passenger just pointed left or right. Anyway, the driver tells me that he was crapting himself the entire time and genuinely thought he was going to pass, but was too scared to stop. So finally they pull over at this really big old house that he described as the most mafia-looking house I've ever damn seen. The guy takes off his glasses, looks at the driver and says, "Thank you very much." Turned out he just had a really big stutter and nothing else. Story 21. My cousin was a grab taxi driver. So in Thailand, we have a TV show called Hormones, which is like Degrassi or Secret Life of an American Teenager, and they had a scene where kids were having sex in the backseat of a taxi. Apparently, these kids wanted to try it out just like in the show and started making out and taking off items of clothing. My cousin said he stopped looking once they started taking them off, but he overheard the girl getting frustrated that the guy couldn't get hard, so she put on her clothes and left the car furiously. Then the guy asked him to take him home. Story 22, not exactly NSFW, but still a crazy experience that happened to my brother. He's a Lyft driver, and one day he was picking up Ann, our nurse, from work and taking her home. She lived kind of far away, so they needed to take the freeway to get to it. They start shooting the crap, and my brother starts talking about how when he was small, he had surgery at the same hospital that she works in. Funny enough, this nurse has been in the or during many surgeries, so she knows a lot about them. She starts talking about them and eventually goes into pretty graphic detail about how the surgery is done. Now, my brother has this problem where he passes out very easy while discussing or seeing medical procedures. He's done it 3 times before, so sure as crap. After a little bit of hearing about the surgery, the nurse notices the car veering off to the left, crossing over a lane. She looks over at my brother and sees him passed out cold behind the wheel. She starts screaming, and the car ends up veering off into a ditch on the side of the freeway. The nurse apparently forgets all her training and just damn books it once the car stops. Apparently, the smell coming from the deployed airbags smelled like smoke to her, and she thought the car was going to blow up. My brother and the nurse were both physically fine, but his car is completely totaled. Story 23. So my dad is an Uber driver, and he says that girls my age, I'm in my early 20s, will drunkenly try to make him go home with them all the time. One time there were 3 girls who drunkenly were singing to Taylor Swift, and they made my dad record them singing the song, and then they made him sing some of the lyrics. He showed me the clip of them singing and him singing. Later it was hysterical. Then they invited him to go to the next bar with them, but he had to keep working. Also one time, an Uber driver told me a girl tried to drunkenly make him duck with her at her house, but he said, no cause he's married. And when she got out of the car, she gave him the middle finger and turned around and lifted up her miniskirt and flashed him. I guess Uber drivers get lots of ladies. Story 24. A young couple paid me $60 cash on top of the cost of the trip to just drive around for half an hour while they ducked in the back seat. I kept towels on hand at the time for various reasons, most commonly for people who have their dogs with them. Anyway, I said okay and had them put a couple towels down. I proceeded to drive down back roads while they had a good old time. Story 25. Happened about a year ago, but I had Ubered a girl from the university in my area. She was pale, freckled, blue eyes with dirty blonde hair, and had a single dreadlock twisted within it. We chatted for a bit about our goals and interests in life. She seemed really down to earth. When I brought up that I made music, she asked if I had any songs I could show her. I put on my most played song that I had at the time, and more than half the song consisted of her commentary on how much she loved it. Considering how gorgeous this girl was, I was a bit more than flattered. She tells me to keep it on my SoundCloud and asks me if I had ever gotten head while listening to my own music. I tell her no, and that I had been single for a while. Her response was music to my ears. Well, there's a first time for everything, right? At this point, I'm praying I don't crash my car with the jolt of endorphins rushing through me. Long story short, I blew my load before we reached destination, and let's just say she was no quitter. I got her number, but nothing evolved beyond that. She still listens to my music, according to SoundCloud. Story 26. Not totally NSFW, but I just this Friday picked up 4 college-age guys from a bar around 1:15 a.m. who were on their way home and teetering on blackout. It was a surge fare of 1.8 and a ride of about 8 miles of mostly highway, so I was pretty pumped to make an easy $20 in 15 minutes. We finished the bulk of the ride when the most intoxicated of the group springs to life and says, "Dude, you do want Taco Bell?" I think he mixed a request with a statement that he wanted Taco Bell. I said sure, as I wasn't going to be staying out much later, and thought it was sure to yield a tip in cash. So I take them to a little plaza that contains a gas station, a convenience store, and of course Taco Bell. This is when that same guy sprung to life once again to say, "No drive-through, let's go in." I told him no, but he said he'd give me $10 if I waited, so I reconsidered. They step out of the car, and this guy huddles his friends for a few seconds before they break off into 3 different directions as the drunkest guy half slumps and leans against my back bumper. One rushes the Taco Bell and returns with 4 $5 boxes. Another hits the gas station and comes back with White Owl cigarillos. When the final man returns, it's with a roll of paper towels, some sort of rivet things, and sticky tack. The drunk guy then unravels the entire roll and shoves it into one of the barf bags that I keep in my back seat, and they get into car for the last of a mile home. Drunk guy is fiddling with it in the back as I talk with the guys about sports and other banalities until I pull up to the house they live in about 2 minutes later. As I pull in, the drunk guy says, "Done!" and then slumped onto his buddy's shoulder. He hands me $10 and grabs the bag containing the paper. He looked me right in the eye, and with an incredibly serious tone, he broke through his intoxication for one sentence and said, "You must always remember to recycle," and then passed out to the point that his friends had to carry him. I then got to see what this blacked-out genius was up to, a device for smoking multiple blunts that was so precisely made. Holes were equidistant, lines were clean, etc. They invited me in to test it, but I had to be on my way. As I drove off, I wondered what this person would be like in the light of day. What does a sober version of this stoner engineer do? What else is he capable of? Story 27. I picked up an elderly lady in my 3 Series BMW in a rather sketchy part of Memphis at about 8 a.m. on a weekday morning. No big deal, right? She gets in and says, "All right, I need you to take me to work, but first we got to go to the liquor store." I say okay and start toward the nearest liquor store, thinking she is just picking something up for after work. On the way there, she mentions she works for a repossession company and that they work for a car dealership that intentionally sells cars to people that can't pay for them. She says she wants to swing by an address on the way to work to see if there is a car she needs to repossess located there. She says the cars usually have GPS, but she thinks the car's owner has disabled the GPS. We arrive at the liquor store and the lady goes in and comes out. She gets in the car, and before I can ask her not to drink in the car, she has downed an entire pint of vodka. At this point, I can't even be mad. I'm flabbergasted. Laughing, I ask the old lady if she even had a chaser. She pulls out a Capri Sun, stabs it with the straw, and starts drinking it. She says, "You probably think I'm some sort of alcoholic or something." I reply, "I don't know if you are or not, but at least you're up and at this morning headed to work." Then she starts directing me back into the sketchy neighborhood to search for a black Chrysler 300. I make it clear to her that I am only a driver, and that if we find this car, I am not getting out of my car. She agrees and says she'll just call a tow truck if we see the car. As we're cruising this really sketchy area looking for the car, she's getting more and more drunk as the alcohol seeps into her. She keeps asking if every black 4-door car is a Chrysler 300. I'm wondering if she even knows what a 300 is. I notice we are getting strange looks from the people we drive by as we head down a long, dead-end street with a shady-looking gated apartment complex at the end that kinda looks like the street from the movie Training Day. We reach the end and go to turn around, and I realize again how sketchy we look cruising around here. If the cops saw us, they would assume we were looking for substances or sex or something illegal. I notice again that everyone sitting outside the apartment complex is staring at us like we are an elephant in the room. I guess she senses my discomfort, or maybe she had to be at work at 9 a.m. because she says, "Okay, now I feel like I'm ready to deal with these mother duckers. Let's head to such and such sketchy car dealership." So we get close to the dealership and she says, "Park over there," and produces another pint of vodka and Capri Sun from her bag. She downs half the pint, mentions something about saving some for later, punches a straw in her Capri Sun, says, "Time to go to work, have a nice day," and exits the vehicle. I'm just sitting there like, what the heck? This was a seriously hardcore old lady of probably 65 or 70 years. Or maybe she just looked old because she drank so much, Ida K. It was a pretty nice fare though, with all the driving around we did for an hour. Story 28. While I've had a few crazy rides, my buddies takes the cake. Around 1 a.m. on a Saturday, he gets a ping that's at 200% surge near the bars. He picked up a well-dressed man who's sober, and once he's in the car, he asked to be taken to the casino. He was picked up in Dallas, and the casino is in Oklahoma. Feeling bad, he warned the guy, "Are you sure that's a 70-mile trip and you're on 200% surge?" Guy says it's fine, and he's happy my buddy is getting paid. They enjoy a nice trip and have some normal talk, and once they get to the casino, my buddy ended the ride and netting himself $300. The guy then realizes he doesn't have a ride home, so he makes a deal with my friend. "Look, I'm going to go gamble for a few hours I give you $250 now, will you wait and when I come back, I'll give you another $250 for waiting and another $500 for the trip back." Buddy agrees and takes a nap until Guy I'd done. Guy comes back and gives him the cash and they head back home. During the small talk, the guy says, "Look, you've been great and seem like a stand-up guy. I want to throw another $500 your way if you let me do BJ." This dude wanted to pay my friend $500 just to do BJ. When you ask him what happened next, he just laughs and says, "Well, rent was due, and if the worst way to make $500 is pretending a chick do BJ you, then it's not so bad." Story 29. I have a few NSFW stories from being a former Uber driver. My first took place last summer in Grand Rapids. I was doing my usual weekend rush and got a request out on the east side of the city. I arrive at the house, and 2 middle-aged, maybe 35-year-old women come out of the house, obviously intoxicated. They were being dropped off about 40 minutes outside the city on a surge, so I was pumped. We go through the normal driver-rider chat, then the two start talking amongst themselves. They are talking about their kids' soccer game in the morning, a cookout that they are going to have, and how much fun they had that night. Then all of a sudden, it starts to get quiet in the back seat. The next thing I have is one whisper to the other, "I love you so much," and then can hear a full-on make-out session going on in the back. I try as hard as I can to act like nothing is happening. That may have been a bad idea because thing in the back only escalated from there. We stop at a stoplight and I hear one of the seatbelts unbuckle. I check the rearview mirror to see one of the moms fully on top of the other. I suggest that the mom should put her seatbelt back on, but she obviously was too busy to listen to that. They continue to go at it the entire way home. The noises and moans from the back were almost unbearable. I get the first house of one of the mom, and they continue going at it as if nothing happened. I politely say, Tell the woman that we have arrived, but she disregards it. I turn the lights on in the car. This was a big mistake. One mom's panties are on the ground, and the other's hands are where you would imagine. She goes, "Oh, we got home so quick," put her panties back on, and gets out of the car. I get the address where I'm taking the other. She immediately passed out, and I had to shake her awake when I got to her destination. After she got out, I had to pull over and laugh at what had just taken place in my car. The second took place during Pride weekend in GR. I got a request from the popular gay bar in the city, which had been super busy, as you would imagine. I pull up and a 6 feet 2 inches large male in a wedding dress walks up, and he sits down in the front seat. Once again, we go through the normal chat at the start of the ride, and then he asks me, "Can you help me out?" Being a good driver and assuming he wants to stop somewhere before I get him to his destination, I say, "Sure, I can help you out." He then goes in a complete different direction than I was expecting. He tells me that this was the first time that he had ever dressed drag and how much he liked feeling beautiful and womanly. I tell him that's awesome and ask him how he had managed to make his tits look womanly. He laughs and continues on saying that he had always been a top and he was thinking about being a bottom. I was not sure what he had meant by that, though it may seem obvious. He goes, "I've always pitched I want to catch." I tell him I understand what he's saying now. He goes, "Now, here is where I need your help." He goes on to say he want to buy a sex toy to help get him ready and needs an unbiased opinion. I laughed, but was in too deep to not help him at this point. He goes through a cornucopia of options of shapes, sizes, and colors of different sex toys. I am doing all I can to keep straight face while also trying to help. He lands on a 6-inch black fist, and I tell him that is the obvious answer. He laughs and goes, "Then it is settled. I will buy it now." He pulls out his card, buys the sex toy. We chat a little more, and then I get to the destination. I drop him off. He tips me $5, then gives me a 5-star rating. Best part, the 5-star comment said, "He really knows how to help a man in need." Once again, I had to pull over and laugh. Story 30. This guy hopped in the front seat. It's a Lyft. And as I glanced right to make a turn, I noticed that he was looking up dirty pics. It's like you really need to jump in the front seat so I can see that you're trying to pleasure. Story 31. I got the ping around 4:30 a.m. When I get to the address, I see this girl who looks startlingly like the actress that plays Ginny Weasley standing in the middle of the street waving, so I stop. Yup, she's my passenger, and she is so drunk and carrying an enormous glass full of red wine. She asked if she could bring the wine in the car. I told her no because we'd both be arrested. She said, "Okay, then I'll chug it." And she did. Okay, so she gets in my car and I drive her maybe 6 blocks away to a friend's place. Her friend hands her a grocery bag of miscellaneous crap. She tells me to drive her home, or wait, I don't want to go home. Just drive around until I figure out where I want to go. Sure, free money. I start driving circles while she drunkenly calls everyone in her phone. Unsurprisingly, no one answers. And she really doesn't want to go home, so we just keep going in circles. I've reminded her at least 3 times that this is costing her money. I have no problem with it, but are you absolutely sure? Yeah, no problem. Money doesn't matter right now. The conversation is one of the more hilarious and utterly weird I've experienced. Of course she's so drunk that her speech is entirely slurred, and I can't make a lot of it out. But I get enough to know that she's not only drunk, but she's been doing substances, and she's on the longest bender of her life. Currently day 8. She was recently fired from her job at a substances dispensary and is in the process of suing them for wrongful termination. Her dad ended her life when she was 4. She had like 3 friends pass in various ways within the past few years. Something about being in a, but falling off the wagon. Her mom is so rich, but doesn't want to give her second house to her own daughter. What the heck? She never wants to marry. Because she has yet to meet a dude who is not a horrible person, but she happily has sex with pretty much all of them, has been pregnant twice, and contracted who knows how many cysts. I really want to work in forensics someday and start her own business. On and on and on. I don't mind listening. It's like having a primetime drama show unfold in my backseat that I'm getting paid to watch. Around 5:45, after over an hour of driving, she said that there's a bar she knows that opens at 7 a.m. If I'm okay with driving aimlessly until then, I assured her that I am. I can take her there. So another hour and 15 minutes of wandering later, I drop her off at the bar. She thanked me profusely, called me boo, and told me to have a good life. And to top it all off, she tipped me with an entire container of substances edibles. Story 32. One time while driving in DC, it got pretty weird at around 2 a.m. They dropped the pin in the wrong location. So when I show up and don't see them, I give them a ring. When the guy picked up, he just kind of starts yelling, but it sounded like he had some type of severe form of autism. I wasn't mad though, I was just trying to help him out, but I really couldn't understand what in the hell he was trying to say. He seemed to do fine when texting though, so I just texted him to send me a message with his new address. About 10 minutes later, after going back and forth, I finally get him. Turns out I had 2 deaf customers, guy and girl, and I got to say they were both pretty attractive. I had heard a deaf person talk before, so I think I can safely say that he hadn't quite mastered it. Here's the fun weird part. About 2 or 3 minutes in, I see them signing at each other, and I mean like hard mode full speed. It looked like two of the most AUG gang members were having a sign language rap battle. Then, almost in an instant, they stopped and did what can only be described as assaulting the other's face. It was a damn battlefield. The guy and girl are both moaning these loud, coarse, almost inhuman noises, and I'm just driving in pure awe. But it was getting really weird, really fast, especially because they both kept on slightly looking at me or gesturing towards me. So I did the only thing I could do, turn the music all the way up. You see, I have a really good sound system, and usually only the people at night allow me to turn up it. I usually ask, but damn it, they're deaf, and they were very preoccupied. The best and worst part was that I think the bass was turning them on or something, because those two got even louder. Finally, we arrived. They gave me a good tip, and the girl gave me a kiss on the cheek, and that was it. I can only imagine how those neighbors feel when they're going at it. Story 33 was actually a drunk passenger. Took an Uber to my substances dealer's house, and the driver totally figured it out. After I got 2 steps out of the car, he sped off, got pretty high before walking home. Story 34. I picked up a drunk couple from a bar. As soon as they got in the car, the woman was telling me about the substances they just did in the bathroom. She then went on to tell me that she was his maid and they were ducking and his wife didn't know. She would wear the wife's lingerie. Also, she was ducking around with the wife. I was taking them to the guy's secret apartment where he did substances. And ducking his maid. He felt a little bad for me, so he gave me all the cash that he had as a tip, $7. I guess he spent it all on substances. Story 35. Some friends and I Ubered back later night after a party. Being intoxicated AF, my friend sitting next to me started to heave. So I, work my quick thinking, opened the window, pushed him to puke outside in the freezing February air. He did his duty, and we were all thankful that he decided to puke outside. Eventually, we arrive by my house and get out. I look on the outside of the car, and the puke had frozen all along the outside of the car by the window. The side of the car was covered in puke. We spent an hour helping the poor Uber driver clean it by throwing hot water FR inside the house and someone quickly scrubbing. Story 36. Picked up a group of young ladies during a bachelorette party. The bride-to-be sits in the front, and while driving to their destination, she rolls down the window and whips out a giant sex toy for all of downtown to Chicago to see. Story 37. I picked up 3 people from a club who needed to get back to a college campus. Midway through the ride, I learned that the guy in the front seat did not know the other 2 in the back. They just tailgated for the ride. On 2 occasions, I had to tell the guy to stop, do pleasure the girl, because the girl started moaning and I assumed that was what was happening. After the second time, I threatened to leave them on the side of the highway. Story 38. Drove Uber. I picked up a woman, pretty attractive, thick in all the right ways. I see that the trip is going to take a little over an hour. You get good at reading people and gauging their willingness for small talk when you've been driving for a while. You also have a pretty good stock of questions and conversation starters based on the length of the trip. If it's going to be 10 minutes, how's your day? Lovely, crafty weather out today, huh? Etc. 30 minutes. So what do you do for a living? Are you still in school? Do you study? Because this was going to be a significantly longer ride, we end up talking about our respective significant others. After about 30 minutes of driving, we became fairly comfortable together, which is why when her phone rang and she informed me that it was her boyfriend and to excuse her for a second while she took the call, I offered a friendly hello that was loud enough for him to hear on the other end of the phone. This was a mistake. After offering my greeting, there was a pregnant pause followed by an audible, "Who the heck was that?" from the phone. A huge fight ensued. "Why the heck do you not trust me at all? You're the one that cheated on me." Unintelligible response. "I'm taking an expenses duck Uber to get home just to see you and take care of your unemployed ass." The fight continued on in this matter for about 5 minutes before she but threw her phone out the window in anger. After hanging up, she looked at me through my rearview mirror and deadpan asked, "You want to pull over and duck me?" I was not expecting this. One of the main things we had talked about was how happy we had been with our respective significant others. I was extremely happy with my then girlfriend, who is now my fiancée, so I declined as delicately as possible. She didn't even seem upset by the fact. That didn't prevent her, however, from leaving her purse in my back seat so as to call me back 10 minutes later and requisition me again. Crazy damn broad, probably would have been a spectacular lay. I hope things are working out for her. Story 39. About a year and a half ago, I bought a new car and figured I would make a few bucks driving for Uber as an excuse to take the new whip out for a spin. I live in Central Florida, about an hour outside of Orlando, and normally would drive on Mondays for a few hours during the day. Pings were pretty spread out, and most of the time I was driving farther to pick up a passenger than they were traveling. Nevertheless, it was enjoyable for the most part. Towards the end of my driving day and a few completed rides around town, I received a ping from a guy out in a large industrial area. I noticed as I was pulling in that the address was attached to a rental storage facility. Only the rental bays were more like hangars than one-car garages. The property had way more units than I could see from the road. And of course, my passenger rents the second closest unit to the back corner of the facility. I pulled up, waited a few seconds, and right when I'm about to text him, he kicks open his doors and yells, "I'll be right there!" running back inside before walking out moments later. Homie is bleeding from the forehead from an apparent recent injury and has a large cast, boot on his left leg. With crutches and all, this big, sweaty man sits down in my back seat. I'm in a pretty good mood, so we head off down the road, and this gentleman is super chatty. We are only going a few miles to Target. No big deal. A few minutes into the ride, I was told that he needed a ride back to his unit. He assured me he wouldn't be long and he would pay for the time I waited for him. Against my better judgment, I agreed and waited. Eventually, he walks out of the store, empty-handed. Now he's again in my back seat asking if we could go to Walmart because Target doesn't carry Dubwood 40. At this point, I'm suspicious, but agree we can head over to Wally World. On the way over, he tells me that he needs the WD 40 for his switchblade business that he runs online. He told me that he buys them at a low cost from China and resells them, but they need some type of lubricant in order for the blade to come out quicker and faster. I drop him off at the door and parked nearby. What an idiot I am, I know. 10 minutes later, I decided I would make a pass by the door and see if I missed him coming outside. I tracked him down behind a bush right outside of the garden center entrance, huffing a can of computer duster. Of course, he saw me and began waving frantically, again taking a hit of the inhalant while doing so. I waved back as I pulled a quick U-turn and got the duck out of there. My new friend fell over the bush, spilling some duster cans on the concrete in front of a few entering families. That scene really made me question why I live in this state. I quit out of the Uber app and drove home. That was the last time I drove strangers around. Story 40. This isn't NSFW in the traditional lewd sense, but one time I picked up a guy who seemed to be in a horrible mood, and he kept urging me to drive faster, telling me he doesn't care if I speed or pass people, etc. He was clutching a small bag to his chest and staring ahead angrily. It was almost an hour drive to the middle of nowhere, but thankfully he had a phone call right after he got in the car to distract him as I flew down the highway. Naturally, I listened to his conversation. Driving gets boring after all. And it was something about his ex-wife, his car had been repossessed, etc. And it seemed he was talking to a lawyer or something. Didn't seem like a friend. After a while, he hangs up the phone and looks out the window in a huff, and then explains to me that his ex-wife had gotten his truck repoed because he was apparently one day late on a payment, and his car had his money, PSD meds, etc. I tried to reassure him as much as possible and tone down the conversation, but he was, understandably, very angry. He then started ranting about the repo guys, who were just outside county lines, hence the long drive, and how he wanted to shoot up the place. Understanding now why he was clutching his bag, this made me a little nervous. And thankfully, I was able to lighten the mood a bit and hopefully convince him not to go on a shooting spree. He then rants about his ex-wife and kids, and says he wants to hit her and that of her lawyer. And I remember saying something like this will only make your problems worse, and he says it doesn't matter since he's off his PTSD meds, so is insane. We're like 15 minutes from his destination by now, and I really have no idea what to do, besides try to identify with this guy while talking him down and being nice, understanding. I end the ride and offer to go in with him to the repo place if he needs a hand getting his truck, and he agrees. We get his truck, and the people had stolen all of his cash, but not his meds, thankfully, and he was holding back tears. This was a very surreal experience. Also, bachelorette parties can be annoying since women in that state think it's totally okay to grope me, which is great. And all I guess, but I'm trying not to die in a fiery car crash. Also, one group stole my hat, which is unforgivable since that particular one no longer exists. Story 41. Unusually was doing a really late night in San Diego. There's this club called Spin that goes till about 4 a.m. and say you have to stop serving alcohol at 2, but people can still get high and dance. That night was a hip-hop night, Thursday Irk. A trashy girl and this guy get into my car, make me wait about 5 minutes while they are trying to convince a second girl to get in the car. Anyways, so it starts raining. They give up, and I start to take them to their destination. They're making out in the back, and I am driving very carefully. It's raining cats and dogs. Rare in SD, no one knows how to deal with it. And I see at least 3 drunk drivers on the streets already. About 2 miles from their exit, I see a foot by my head. I'd have kicked them out then and there, but it was the highway, and I'd have kicked them out at the exit, but their house was 1 block away. Anyways, the car was bouncing at the exit. I haven't even had sex in the back of my car. Got them kicked off of Lyft. Story 42. My 2 stories would have to be a lady who was kind of drunk and kept asking me questions and moaning slightly every now and then. When she got out of the car, I checked the back seat and there was a Sharpie, a sticky Sharpie that was obviously used for something. The other was 2 escorts that had a long ride and kept daring each other to flash me. Give me a back rub, suck my earlobe. That progressively got to the point where one dared the other to hook up with me when we got to their house. Story 43. Got off my shift at work, app designer in his early 40s picks me up to take me home. We're shooting the crap on the way, and he asks me if I smoke, which I do. I invite him in to smoke, and the next thing I know, this dude is grabbing a half ounce from his trunk and sitting in my backyard, smoking me out for a couple hours. Now he's my dealer. Story 44. Lyft driver here answered a pickup request not too far from my apartment at a KFC. This portly guy ashes a cigarette before getting into my car, slowly because he's handicapped, and the second the door shuts, he asks me, "How do you feel about working off the clock?" I wasn't sure what he meant, so I asked, and he goes on to say, "I will pay you cash money, twice as much as you'll make if you turn off the app." We're almost out of the parking lot. And I'm ready to ask him to get out and call someone else when he hands me a $100 bill. I probably would have made $10 for this fare. I was having a rough week and the money would go a long way, so I said, damn it. His destination was only about 20 minutes away and we began talking because I was curious why he didn't want the app running. He was difficult to understand and for bursts of about 10 seconds he would go completely silent, mid-conversation. I looked in the rearview mirror when this happened and I saw him slouched over, completely passed out. But the weird thing was, he would snap back in an instant and resume speaking where he left off. He did this for most of the ride. We were almost at his destination and kept asking me to stop by a 7-Eleven for a soda. What he really needed was a water. We get to his stop and he doesn't get out. He says, "Okay, we're going to wait here to pick up the other person, then we're going to the next location." "Where's that?" I ask. "Downtown," he says. "Nope. I'm not doing this. Downtown is 45 minutes drive and I don't know who this other person is. This is getting weird." I tell him I gotta be somewhere else around that time, so he'll have to call another ride. He starts to get pissed, but I remind him he never specified this in the beginning. He asks for me to split the $100. I don't have change, so I give him back the $100. He hands me a $20 and I say, "Thanks. Get out." He says, "Wait, hold on. I can cover the rest." He pulls out a clear, hard plastic Ziploc bag and I see a bunch of substances, along with pills and powder. In my head, I'm freaking out because he's about to give me a bunch of substances to sell. I'm already coming up with what to say next when he hands me 3 scratch lottery tickets and says, "Those are winners, you can get the other 20 from those." "Thanks. Get the duck out." Story 45. I was trying to just make a living and keep a low profile, so I started driving a limo a few years ago. I picked up a group of women from a wedding party and they were clearly drunk and one of them flashed me. Story 46. Seems like the moral of all this is that if you are an Uber driver, then you should cover the entire passenger section of your car in disposable plastic. Story 47. Not so much NSFW, but here was one of my more laborious rides. Got a call from a guy at a nightclub. He was calling for a friend who was practically blackout drunk. There was a large group of people with him, and I believe they were celebrating a birthday or something. So they sent him off with me and went back to the club to keep partying. Some friends, huh? The guy didn't live very far away, but once the ride started going, he was immediately vomiting everywhere. I had bags and everything, but he could hardly sit up and was just throwing up all over himself and trying to throw up out the window and missing horribly. Once we got to his place, he was knocked out asleep. I parked the car and made sure he was still breathing and all that, got him to drink water, tried to keep him awake and get him talking. This went on for a while. Eventually, he threw up the water, but he seemed a little better than before. He was determined to get inside his house, but could hardly walk, so I had to hold him steady somehow. I'm small, he was a lot bigger than me, and walk him to his house. I thought that would be the end of it. But there was a gate I needed to open for him, and once I started messing with the lock, a huge dog came out and started barking like crazy. Had to have been at least 150 pounds. The guy was just sitting on the ground, and I was like, what the heck is happening right now? I've just spent nearly an hour taking this guy 3 miles down the street, and my car is covered in vomit, and he's going to pass if I leave him. So I just took a risk and opened the gate, and the dog was completely friendly, probably still puppy-aged, which was cute until he jumped up and crushed his giant body against me and bit me with his sharp puppy teeth. Play with me, damn it. I was able to guide the guy to his front door and get him to bed. Giant puppy wanted to play more and made it really difficult to leave. Not going to lie, I stalled a bit and played with him. Why the hell not at this point? My car was a mess, so I wasn't going to be able to work anymore that night. Story 48. Had a passenger talk in graphic detail to an ex about how mad she was that she had ducked him. She repeated it at least 10 times. Story 49. My cousin told me a story where these 2 MILFs called for a Lyft. Apparently, they were middle-aged trophy wives that didn't get any from their husband, as he described them. They had their own car, but wanted my cousin to leave his Lyft vehicle there and have them drive their car over to their house because they had a couple drinks and they said they were going to get him another Lyft back. Well, he agreed, and at some point, both of the MILFs offered him sex, and he denied it. He said he regrets that one. Story 50. I drive for Lyft, and this happened the weekend of St. Patrick's Day. I was out doing my rounds, and that night was pretty crazy due to St. Patrick's Day. The moon was full, and during sex's sayu, I had a full car of people. This was a Lyft line, so it was a pair of 2 people. A couple composed of a guy and girl, and 2 girlfriends out and about for the night. We stopped at a red light and waited for it to turn green, when suddenly a line of women were walking in front of my car. across the crosswalk. Well, the leader of the line decided to take off her top, bra and all. The remaining 5 women followed along and removed their tops as well. Me and the girlfriend from the couple just watched in awe as 6 women walk across without tops. It was a good night. I just wish I had my dash cam then. Now I drive with one 24-hour a day. Story 51. Picked up a couple from a fancy hotel party at around 3 a.m. The girl was a short with dark hair, wearing a really short dress. 2 minutes into the ride, he asked me to turn the music up, so I obliged, and that's when I started hearing faint moaning noises. I looked at my rear view, and sure enough, he was paddling her pink canoe. We locked eyes, and I told them just not to make a mess. Guy gave a nice tip, not his, after I dropped them off. Story 52. Not a driver, but I was having a smoke out front of my apartment when an Uber pulled up with a girl in the back seat. A neighbor from down the hall I recognized who was screaming at the driver and refusing to get out of the vehicle. It sounded like she didn't want to pay him for the ride and was demanding her cash back, which didn't make sense to me because Uber isn't a cash service. When she started hitting him, I phoned the police. 15 minutes later, they showed up, and she still hasn't left his vehicle. The cops drag her out and arrest her. Turns out she gave the driver a BJ on the way and thought that would get her a free fare, and was more than a little upset that she still had to pay. Girl never looked me in the eyes again when we passed in the hall. I'd drive for Uber if it meant getting paid to get BJ. Story 53. Not a driver, but was a passenger when an Uber driver, female in her 40s, was talking on the phone to customer service about what had happened days earlier. Apparently, she picked up 3 persons in Miami Beach after Ultra Festival. One guy sits on the front, guy and girl in the back. Guy in the front starts talking to her and puts music loudly. In the meanwhile, the back passengers start ducking. She told me she could not even turn around because she felt kind of shocked, but she told me she heard a lot. I was sitting in the back seat at the time she was talking on the phone when I heard that the lady had not cleaned the back seat since the event. I slowly tried sitting in a corner with one ass cheek. Story 54. One time, I was in a Lyft during a blizzard. We arrive at a couple of lanes divided by one of those flat concrete medians. Both lanes are gridlocked. Lyft driver goes, "Watch this," and drives up the damn median while the cars on both sides honk furiously. I protest, and he brags that he is a big man in the city, and the cops won't touch him. Anyway, it's not an erotic story, but I'd say it was definitely not safe for anyone involved. Story 55. This is probably the funniest ride I've had. I picked up a group of 3 guys and a girl from a pretty well-known gay club. When they walk up to my car, 2 hop in the back. First, then, the other girl and guy can't decide where they want to sit, front or back. Well, she tells the guy to behave, and she sits in the back seat. Well, we get to driving. I notice this guy is covered in glitter and who I guess they call bears. He's a bigger guy with a beard, makes a comment on how I'm cutier than the first Uber they ordered. The girl starts to agree. I guess this reminds him of the guy he left at the club and starts talking about the most perfect Canadian junk he's ever seen back at the club. His friends tell him to call him and he's get upset stating it will never happen. They fight yelling back and forth. All the while, he complains he missed this junk. Switched the junk nationality from Canadian to Australian a couple of times too. I guess I never heard a really thirsty gay guy before. Story 56. Worked for both Uber and Lyft. I think 4th of July weekend a couple years ago, I had a couple that was thrown out of a bar pretty early, like 8 p.m. On the way back to their apartment, the one that was in the back seat kept bugging me about what I wanted for the trip. He was also the one that drank much more than the female in the front seat. After explaining to him that the ride payment is all that was needed for payment, he kept pushing the subject. The girl started to ask me what I was into. Explaining I was gay excited her and the back seat passenger much more. The same round of questing kept going 5 more times before they decided to make a stop. We pulled in a 711 for them to pick up my payment. This consisted of a 12-pack of beer and coconut water. Back on our voyage to their apartment, they started pushing for me to come up and hang out for the night. I kept declining and finally dropped them off. The dude was already out of the car on the way up to his apartment. The chick stayed behind trying to persuade me to come up. Politely declining, she finally got out. They took the beer, but left the coconut water. Story 57. In my city, there is an area called the Iron Triangle that is famously crime-ridden. During one trip around 2 a.m. when I went to pick up the client, a woman, I was instead greeted by 2 men who said the ride was for them. They tried to explain where they wanted to go, but I had no idea what they were saying and they hadn't entered an address. I had to rely on them saying turn left or right as I drove. At some point, I realized we had turned down a street that would take us to the aforementioned Iron Triangle and there was no turning back now. They eventually had me roll up to some beat-down house with no lights on. What made this trip different from every ride I've ever given is that they then told me that one of the guys was going to stay in the car with me and the other would go inside. I would then drive them back to where I picked them up. This meant 2 things. 1, obviously some kind of substances deal is going down. And 2, I now have to just sit here outside this house with a stranger and can't race off away from the sketchiest area in town. I do keep a knife on me and boy, did I have my hand on that thing the whole time. The eeriest part was that it was 2 in the morning, and there were people wandering around everywhere, some coming really close to my car. In the end, nothing bad happened, and I drove the guys back to the projects. But it was definitely the scariest 20 minutes of my life. Story 58. I sort of have two. Neither are that bad, though. First was a drunk couple I picked up from the bars. They were headed home about 7 miles away. They chatted with me for a few minutes before the conversation slowed down, so I just put the music up a few notches. We were on the highway when I heard the sound of a zipper and a belt buckle. I hit the dome lights and checked the rear view mirror and saw that the girl was getting ready to blow the guy. I told them I can either drop them off right now on the side of the highway, or they can wait until they get home. They decided to wait. The second story is when I picked up 2 German guys from a hotel who said they were in the city for a work thing. They wanted to go to a strip club, which is pretty common. We get there and I tell them to have a nice night when they ask me to come in with them. I told them I have to work that night because I needed the money. One of the guys reaches into his wallet and pulls out $150 and tells me to come be their personal valet all night, so I agreed. Story 59. I've done about 1,400 rides for Uber and about 500 for Lyft in the last 8 months. I've had a few good stories. I've had 2 pukers so far. That's probably been the most unpleasant part of my job so far, as far as NSFW, would be the 2 women passengers in the back seat. One was pretty sober, and the other was very much not. The drunk girl, who sounded like she was eating cigarettes, decided she wanted to demonstrate what her S sounded like, complete with writhing around in the back seat. My car is not very big to begin with. Me and the sober girl thought it was pretty funny, and even though it was a pretty short trip, we were given a pretty convincing performance. Story 60. I've got 2. I was working in Tucson, picking up frat boys from a weekend pool party, and I pick up this guy in a banana hammock and girl in a one-piece. They immediately get in the car, and she straddles him when I pull away. Swimsuits start coming off, and I hear moaning. I immediately pull over on the side of the highway and kick them out. Second one isn't so NSFW, but I picked up a woman in Denver. Initially, she was very rude, but wanted to ride across town, so I put up with it. She slowly started to warm up and started hinting she wanted party favors for sex. When I told her I didn't have any, she started talking about the bugs and why there are so many all over her. Obviously, she was very high. She then resorted to begging me to come into her place for a night of met and sex. I adamantly refused and dropped her off. I had heard a story of my friend picking up a sorority girl who was so drunk, she pooped on his backseat. Another bonus story, I picked up some frat boys from Western Denver. They got in my car, and I saw that the destination was a local sleazy strip club 30 miles away. I gladly obliged taking them. About 5 minutes in, one asks if he can make a quick call. From what I could gather, he called one of the escort and proceeded to have 30 minutes of group phone sex with her. All the while, the phone is on speakerphone. Story 61. Former cabbie here. Picked up a couple from a bar, restaurant, and they were going to a friend's party. They didn't seem that plastered, but about halfway into the 20-minute ride, I hear the telltale signs of some BJ in the back seat. Whatever. It happens on the sly every so often, and I figure people like the idea that they're being slick in public, so I let it go. Well, eventually it sounds like she's got her hands in his pants, and then straight up just starts straddling him. They go at it hard for about 5 minutes, and then we get to the drop-off. I say something like, "As long as you guys didn't make a mess back there, we're all good." Dude looks horrified, like he's thinking, "Did he notice my GF just ducked?" Yes, bro, you guys were the opposite of subtle. Girl is blushing and as red as her lipstick. Now I'm just laughing to myself because they actually thought they were being stealthy. It was a $15 fare, and they guy hands me $40 and says, "Hey man, thanks for being cool about it." Easy money and a good story to tell. Worth it, IMO. Story 62. I have a buddy who was taking an older couple to a party. He said they were super friendly, and they gave him a $100 tip, a bag of shrooms, and the guy asked his girlfriend to have her flash my buddy. They also invited him to the party they were going to. This is all funny because my friend was pretty Mormon at the time, but on his way out of the religion. That definitely gave him a taste of the real world. Story 63. Picked up a couple from the Grizzly Rose, filthy country bar in Denver. Guys asks to piss, so I stop as he pisses while leaning against the car. Welcome splashback. Guy seems to go from being quiet to angry in his verbiage, and demeanor through the drive, even to the point of grabbing my seat while his partner tries to calm him. At stoplight, hear him threaten to kill his partner. Cue adrenaline. Threats towards partner intensify on highway. Pull into hard shoulder and gradually depress brake pedal so as to avoid any wheel lock. Exit vehicle, guys follows me out, tries to fight me on side of highway. I sprint back to car as he falls flat on his face. Drive woman home and leave guy on side of highway. Try figuring out why she's with him. Afraid her son will judge her if she leaves, despite her being the income source for the family. Classic abusive stronghold. Very upsetting. I called the police immediately and reported everything, including address. Story 64. To make conversation, I always ask my Uber driver if they have any horror stories. One guy told me that he picked up this couple in all black clothes and he admitted he felt a little creeped out by them. It was the middle of the night and they had asked to be dropped off at a cemetery. He thinks perhaps they live across the road or something and tries. Fails to make conversation with them. He drops them off, looks at his phone, then looks back and they are nowhere to be seen, disappeared. He stayed for a few minutes looking to see if they would pop up anywhere, but they never did. Freaked him out big time. Story 65. This happened to my cousin a few weeks ago, actually. She was getting a ride home from a friend's house somewhat late at night and made the mistake of getting in the front seat of an Uber. Her driver was this middle-aged guy who would not stop giving her weird compliments and telling her how her boyfriend is so lucky. He even tried touching her leg and hair, and it was just super weird. So my cousin gets home and contacts Uber about this driver, and they apologize and give her a free ride. But a few days later, someone comes to their front door and won't stop knocking and saying, "I'm looking for my friend." My aunt is the only one home and yells from an upstairs window for them to leave or she's calling the police. They leave after she threatens the police, and later that night when she's telling my cousin about her day. She pieces together by the description of the guy that it was her creepy Uber driver. She opens up the app and found the guy's picture from her previous rides, and sure enough, my aunt confirms that it's the same dude. They contacted Uber but have not heard back yet. They are also considering a restraining order. Story 66. So my boyfriend drove for Uber for about 2 weeks while he was in between jobs. One night early on, he picked up a couple of girls outside of a bar, and they were absolutely plastered. He felt like he recognized one of them, but couldn't exactly place where he knew her from. A few minutes into the drive, the girl he thinks he knows asks the other one, "Can you help me fix my dress?" So he looks into the rearview mirror to see what's up, and in their drunken fumbling, the girl managed to let her halter top fall down, and she accidentally flashed him. She was super embarrassed about it. He reassured her it was fine and dropped them off at their condo. The best part was the next night when he and I went out to dinner together to our favorite restaurant. One of the waitresses was the drunk girl who flashed him, and that's where he remembered her from. She was either so drunk she didn't remember her wardrobe malfunction, or chooses to act like nothing happened whenever we see her there. Story 67. Picked up this really drunk couple at about 2 a.m., and when they got in my car, the guy was already in Facebook Live, because why not, I guess. The trip was going to be about 25 minutes, and so he and this girl are having a good time. They ask me to put on some music, so I turn on a local pop station, and the girl starts kind of dancing in the back seat. Guy is still putting stuff on Facebook Live, and I just tune them out. I realize that things have gotten kind of quiet, so I look in the rearview mirror, and what do I see? The chick is now topless, BJ the dude. You guessed it. Still on Facebook Live. I just ignore it and take them where they need to be. They get out. Chick's still topless at a house, and the dude comes to my window, hands me $50 and says, "Dude, thanks for the best ride of my life," and disappears, never for me to see him again. They gave me 5 stars and a review that simply said, "Cool guy." Story 68. A friend of mine used to drive for Easy Taxi back when it was available where I live. One day, he tells me about someone he had gone to pick up. .it was a girl and a middle-aged guy. Nothing strange about that because sugar daddies are pretty common where I live. The girl tells him to go round in a circle, basically, so that they end up where they started. As soon as the trip starts, the girl starts blowing the middle-aged guy. By the time the trip is done, the guy has already blown his load. The girl thanks my friend, pays the fare, and throws in a little extra. Turns out she was an escort, and she have been to BJ guys in the back of taxis for a while since they discovered it's cheaper and safer than hiring out a room, if it's only for a BJ. This story took place in Nairobi, if anyone is wondering. Story 69. Well, I'm not a driver, but had an Uber driver that had a mental breakdown causing her to slam on the brakes in the middle of the highway. She said we couldn't listen to music, was telling us about everything wrong in her life, and pulled to the side of the highway. Made my 2 friends and I get out of the car while she continued her breakdown, but let us back in after a few minutes. Finally get home and charged us $30 extra, but we just paid it knowing that nothing good would come if we didn't. The next morning, I get an email from Uber saying they're charging my card for $200 because she said there were bodily fluids in the car. I immediately called them and told them the whole story and asked what fluids were in the car. They sent me pictures of her seat where she had put water on her seat. None of us had any drinks in the car, and in the pictures you can see the water beads, meaning that had to be done right before the picture was taken because the seat would soak up the water. End of the story is duck Uber. I still got charged $260 for a water spot the size of a dime. Story 70. Number 1. I picked up some 2 guys and 2 girls. They all packed together in the back of my 2005 tiny Jetta. They then had me drive downtown to a sketchy hotel and had me wait in the car while one if the guys got out. He came back 5 minutes later with a bunch of substances and then told me to bring them back to their original place. They offered me some blow, but I politely declined. Then one if the girls asked if I wanted to smash. When I dropped them off, I politely declined. Number 2, I drove 5 college girls home and they kept talking about how attractive I was in a not-so-quiet voice. Then they asked if I wanted to come inside. It was 2 a.m., so I of course said sure. They warmed me up some leftovers from their party, gave me some soda, and then went to bed. so I thanked them and drove off. Being painfully awkward is fun. Story 71. Well, there was the guy who proceeded to get butt naked in my back seat while piss drunk and change into a teenage mutant ninja turtle costume. It was Michelangelo, for the record. Story 72. A friend told me he picked up two guys and they went to a coffee shop and bought a bag of donuts. He was driving for about 5 minutes and they were giggling. He turned his mirror down and they both had 3 donuts on their junks. Pretty sure they were high. They left a big mess too. Story 73. Not Uber, but a cab driver I was friends with some time ago. He had a lot of regulars because he owned his own taxi, even though he worked for a company, and would take fares whenever, day or night, if people called his cell. Anyway, he picked up a couple of dancers from this pretty rough men's club and was driving them home. One was fairly new to him. On the way, they smoke and were passing it around as he was driving, and the new one says, "Oh crap, pull over, I have to puke." Now my friend is nervous. In our city, cab drivers don't often get pulled over, but it's around 4 a.m., and he's on a deserted street with an escort leaning out of his car puking. When she's done, she sits back and says, "I'm sorry," to everyone. One of the regulars says, "Don't worry, hun." Story 74. My friend once told me a story about how she was giving her boyfriend BJ under a blanket in the back of an Uber vehicle, and the driver went over a hole, which then caused my friend to bite this poor dude's junk. Felt so bad for the bloke. As my friend said, he couldn't get hard for almost 2 weeks afterwards. Story 75. I was the passenger in this situation, but it was still NSFW nonetheless. It was about midnight, and I was at a friend's doing laundry. Once I was done, I called a Lyft and got picked up. While driving, we passed by a gas station, and I asked to stop to pick up some smokes. I left my laundry bag in the car, tied up tight in the back seat, and went inside. Now I was only inside the store for 2 minutes tops, and I already had a weird feeling in my tummy. I fast-paced, walked back to the car, and I suppose I caught the driver off guard because upon opening the car door, I see my underwear in this dude's lap. So the whole drive home, I'm staring out the window, not wanting to get hitting and get dropped off about a block away from my actual destination. Didn't get that underwear back and honestly didn't want it back. Story 76. I was Uber driving during Anthrocon, the world's biggest furry convention. Picked up a guy in an elaborate red costume. He removed the head and was pretty nice for the short ride. We just talked about Pittsburgh and traffic, etc. When he got out of the car, I reached back with my lint roller to get the red fuzz off my seat, and I found a packet of seeds. Sweet basil seeds. Was this his calling card? Who carries around seeds on a Thursday night? Story 77. My girlfriend drives for Lyft. One afternoon, she picked up a couple of frat boys, and they immediately started acting weird. They start rubbing all over the seats and asking if they could take off their shirts. She politely tells them no, so they beg her to let them. They offer her some substances if they would let them take their shirts. She said no again. Then they asked her if she would have sex with them. She tells them no, and is still trying to be polite, but then they start to negotiate prices for her to sleep with them. All she has to do is pay them $100 to duck their friend, not pay her pay them. She dropped them off and reported them to the app. Uber drivers, what's the deepest secrets you've overheard in your car? Former Uber driver here. Picked a girl up, a sweet girl from a bar on a Wednesday night. Absolutely hammered about 10 p.m. She got into my car, apologized for being so drunk, and politely asked if we could just drive around a little while with the windows down. I was prepping for a cleaning fee, trying to drive and pull a vomit bag out of the glove box. But no, she just did that airplane thing with one hand out the backseat window. She asked me if I had ever thought about passing, to which I replied, yeah, I guess so. That's when she told me that she had cancer. I remember my heart just pounding. She told me she was dying and she was going to be okay. Tonight, she was celebrating with her work friends, who threw her a going-away party. She told them she was taking a position abroad. I just didn't tell them that abroad was heaven. I turned off my app and cried my ass all the way home. Story 2. I picked up this young, overly affectionate couple that spent the entire trip making out in my back seat and telling each other that they loved each other. Cute. So I drop off the couple and head on my way to pick up my text fare. I hear a cell phone ring in my back seat, realize it's my previous rides, and pick up the phone to let them know I have it and I'll come back to drop it off. Turns out it was the guy's wife phoning to check in on him while he was on a business trip, which he was thoroughly enjoying with his mistress. Story 3. One time I was driving a dude for a bit of a long trip. Was going to take around 30 minutes. He wasn't hammered, but definitely a bit drunk. It was late, and he must have been feeling a bit down. So he confided in me and asked me for some advice. He told me he's madly in love with his fiance's best friend, and he couldn't back out now. He'd been with this girl 4 years and engaged for one, ready to be married in a few months. It was pretty sad to hear, because it wasn't just your average story. It was filled with a lot of subtle emotional and mental anguish. The guy went through about 5 years of ups and downs with his girl, and found an innocent friend and comfort in the best friend. After a few years, he developed feelings, and it was just downhill from there. Felt bad for the guy because he seemed like he was truly in love with his fiancée too. Although he had strong feelings for this friend, he knew that going through with the marriage meant a lifetime of being around the friend and suppressing feelings. But also breaking it off meant that he lost the girl of his dreams. Seemed like a genuinely nice guy, and I hope he's doing okay. Story 4. Picked up 2 dudes. They were talking about how they were going to keep hiding their relationship from their wives and children. Pretty messed up stuff. Story 5. Drove Uber one night. It was pretty tame until I picked up 2 guys who wanted to go to a men's club 40 miles away. As they requested an Uber Select fare, I was happy to drive that far, $80. It took them 15 minutes to get ready and into the car, and they seemed cool, so I wasn't worried. As soon as we got on the freeway, the guy in the passenger seat started asking about Uber driving, and things got dark. After a few minutes, he started saying crap like, "What would you do if someone just grabbed the steering wheel and ran the car into the median? And have you ever thought about what would happen if someone in the back seat tried to beat you while you were driving?" I got a little freaked out and tried to lighten the mood by asking what they were celebrating, etc., but the one guy just kept at it. I was happy to get to the strip club and get them out of the car. Bonus was the bouncer at the club gave me $40 for dropping them off there. I never drove Uber again. Damn that. Story 6. It wasn't so much weird as it was random, but my first night driving for Uber, I picked up a dude at 2:30 a.m. that was finishing up a pub crawl. The dude was dressed in a purple dinosaur onesie and was hammered. He got in and started telling me his entire life story and how he came out to his parents and moved across the country the next day. Story 7. I know this is the opposite of what you asked because I'm a passenger, not a driver. I had an Iraqi driver tell me he was an engineer in Iraq before the first Gulf War, and he'd developed a superior means of gilding furniture, chandeliers, etc., which you can imagine was hot in pre-war Husseinville. Well, Uday wanted to go into business with him, but, and this is a direct quote, "First Uday wants to be your partner in business, then he wants to be partner in your wife." Words to live by. Story 8. Took this 19-year-old kid's and what I assumed was his GF back to her house on Pride weekend in SF. They made out the whole ride. When I dropped them off, only she got out. He said, "Take me to Castro and 18th. I said, "Really?" And he said, "Yeah, I only make out with girls when I'm rolling." Never a dull moment in San Francisco. Story 9. I picked someone up here in Memphis and took them to a shady apartment. They came out smelling like some really good kush. I asked them to go back in and get me some. Got pay, got substances, and got a new dealer out of it. Story 10. 1. 2 girls taking about how they ducked the same guy. Both agreed his junk was too big and he was hurting them by lasting too long. Both concluded he was gay. 2. 2 middle-aged couples trying to agree to a group sex. Story 11. Once I had an extremely drunk middle-aged couple fight for an entire 30-minute ride. They attempted to bring me into their fight many times. I just pretended like I was deaf and didn't answer when they tried to rope me into it. Story 12. Not so much secrets as they were things people don't normally say or do in front of strangers. Asterisk picked up a divorced father whose buddy paid for his Lyft ride to the bar. Why? Because he was supposed to see his kid that evening. For an overnight, but the wife had the authority to dictate the terms of him seeing his own child no matter what, and she wasn't feeling it. Granted, I definitely got one side of the story, but it was damn terrible to see a man who desperately wanted to spend time with his kid be completely blocked from it over bullcrap. California had given dad so little rights, from how this guy described it, that even though he had a stable job, good house, and was willing to pay for a hotel, so he and his son would stay in the town the mom lived in, it was a no-go. That was a tough one, because I was so powerless to help. Picked up a girl to take her straight from work to the hospital to see her dad. Her mom had called her work to make her end her shift early because it was serious. Her dad had cancer. I dropped her off and was like, I hate this job because I'll never know how her night ended. Wrong. Next night, I'm taking people home from bars, and her 2 guy friends took her out to get wasted because her dad had passed. They were being drunk idiots, so when I took them to get pizza, she came outside, and we talked about it a little. That was probably the one ride where I felt I had a positive impact on someone's life beyond getting them home safely. I was taking 2 couples home, dropped off couple 1, and the husband of couple 2 was in the front seat and made a comment I didn't hear. Apparently, he insulted the wife of couple 1, his wife's BFF. The wife in couple 2 didn't like that, so she hit him. Not like a playful slap. She struck her husband, straight on domestic violence. I laid down the law. We're not going anywhere as this is how it's going to be. The dude was drunk on tequila. Chick was drunk too. So the ride home was him asking me, how would you feel? And me saying, it's not about how I feel. You two need to discuss this tomorrow when you're sober. It's weird, man. You get a passing glimpse into people's lives and loved it and hated it at the same time. Story 13. My friend Uber's in my hometown. Picked up some really nice girls out on First Friday. They're talking about their plans for next autumn. Guy thinks he recognizes one of them. Turns out to be my younger sister, and he tells me all about it. And that's how I found out my little sister was moving to Spain. Story 14. I once had an Uber driver tell me that he had cancer and wasn't accepting to live beyond the end of year. I was drunk AF, but that sobered me up real quick. It still haunts me. I didn't know what to say to him. Story 15. I haven't really heard anything too juicy, but so far my favorite was this one. I picked up two guys in downtown LA. From their conversation, I gather they'd just met at the bar I picked them up from and were going home to duck. One was younger and clean-cut. The other was older and rather scruffy. So I'm driving up Main Street to the 101, and the scruffy guy starts talking about how he used to live there in the 90s, and it was a whole lot scummier back then. He mentions he used to have an older boyfriend back then. The boyfriend would call the scruffy guy and tell him to walk down to the sidewalk in a tied-off shirt and Daisy Dukes. Then the boyfriend would drive up in his car, and the scruffy guy would lean in his window, and the boyfriend would ask him how much. And the scruffy guy would get in, and they'd role-play that he was an escort and the boyfriend was his John. The clean-cut guy kind of glossed over this and moved the conversation along, but I thought to myself that scenario sounds hot. Story 16. Not my story, but I asked a friend to tell me his that he has shared with me before. I was once driving for Uber and picked up two young Spanish guys, 25 maybe. They were clean-cut, spoke English very well, and were really polite. The first thing that seemed off was that both decided to sit in the back, when typically one of two people would usually ride a shotgun. It was quiet for a bit after the usual small talk I made, and then they started speaking to each other in Spanish. I know some Spanish, but I wasn't really trying to listen in on their conversation. But with how quiet they were speaking, I decided they were trying to be secretive, so I started doing my best to eavesdrop. This became kind of easy because they started getting louder and it was obvious they were arguing. Now my Spanish is piss poor, but I think kept hearing me, you, they, where, and location. I'm not sure what the one finally said to the other, but they stopped arguing. And that's when I heard, you get out. And the Spanish form used was a to command, which I had learned in Spanish was a very disrespectful way to speak to someone. Then there was a lot of arguing where I could only really hear get out, and I paid for a short while. Finally, they stopped, and one of them said very politely, my friend forgot his date tonight. Could you please let him out here so he can walk home before we get further away? I was conflicted, but I complied with his request and decided I must have been interpreting their conversation wrong. The one getting out thanked me for the ride, apologized for the inconvenience, said one more thing in Spanish to his friend before he left. After that, I thought I had definitely misunderstood them. But then, the dude asks if I can change the destination, saying his plans have changed now due to his friend's date. I said, of course, now getting very suspicious, but trying to tell myself I was overreacting. It was a long drive, longer than the first destination, and we began to leave town. Finally, I pull up to this old farmhouse that looked abandoned, but figured it must have just been his place and was a bit shabby. But when the guy got out, he didn't walk toward the house. He just kind of stood there and said bye. Being suspicious, I drove off down the road for a while before turning back around, and I saw that the guy was walking along the side of the road toward a small graveyard, a decent ways away from the house. I didn't slow down because I didn't want him to think I was snooping or even notice it was my car. I'm not sure what happened, but I'm pretty sure there was something waiting in that cemetery hidden somewhere, and as soon as his buddy told him where it was, he cut him out of the deal and made him get out, and there was nothing the one getting out could do because he wasn't the one paying. And I think he may have even been scared of the other guy. Weirdest night of my life. Story 17. Picked up a girl mid-Saturday. She was a bit upset and a little teary and opened up to me. Turned out a business she had started was failing and she was in debt and had turned to stripping on the side to cover the bills. She said the pay was good, but she kept getting really sick from all the booze she felt obliged to drink. Part of her job was making guys spend money at the bar. She hated it and felt trapped and kept asking me what I would do in her situation. I'm a guy, so kind of hard for me to answer. Tried to give her the best advice I could think of, like getting the tax office to withhold tax for a while, but couldn't help really. Only thing I could do was end the trip early. Other one was a couple of off-duty cops who didn't want their friends to know they were using it. Uber is still in a legal gray area here. Story 18. Former Uber driver and current taxi driver here. One of the things that I didn't really expect from this job is that I feel like a bartender at times. People will just vent to us. Maybe it has to do with the fact that we're an anonymous ear, and people feel comfortable telling things to a third party. Whatever the case, a couple stick out in my memory. One was as an Uber driver in North Jersey. Picked up this girl and her brother. They had been out celebrating her birthday. Brother is completely wasted, and she is sober. He gets in the back of my car, passes out, and she sits in the front. The ride starts, and we make small talk. Apparently, her brother and her boyfriend had taken her out for her B-day, but boyfriend got mad at her and went somewhere else. And brother decided to get crap-faced immediately, so she had to take care of him. It ended up being a crafty B-day. On top of that, she told me her boyfriend was verbally abusive and made her feel really crafty all of the time. I basically said stuff along the lines of, you need to watch out for your own happiness, and your so should be making you happy. Otherwise, I don't see the point in having a so. She started crying buckets and told me how her entire life, she never realized that. She always just assumed that boyfriends' husbands have the right of way, as she put it, and that she never even considered that she should be happy in a relationship. Maybe that stuck with her, and she's moving on to better and happier things. I'd like to think so. That ride ended with me helping her drag her brother out of my car and up the steps to the house. Second one, now I'm a cabbie on Long Island. Pick up these two women mid-20s-ish and bring them to a restaurant. We were on the way there, and we start chatting, and the topic of depression and died comes up. One of them was in school to eventually become a psychiatrist. I, myself, deal with depression and anxiety, and I also have a history of died attempts. And I speak openly about it when the topic comes up because I want a stigma of mental illness to go away. Anyway, I drop them off and they ask for my name so they can have me as a driver later. A few hours later, the dispatcher sends me back there to pick them up on a driver request. Sweet. I pick them up and we're heading back, but the mood in the car has drastically changed from earlier. It was pretty much silent. I figure maybe they're tired or whatever. Halfway home, one of the women asks if she can ask me about my depression and death attempts, and although it was kind of an odd question, I go along with it for the reasons I stated above. Now she's visibly upset, and she confesses that one of her best friends ended her life a few days before. No warning signs or anything. Without too many details, I basically said that that's actually not uncommon. As some people who attempt died don't want their friends or family to know how they're feeling, so she shouldn't feel guilty about it. Then she confesses that she was having bad ideation herself and had nobody to talk to about it. So I basically said it's good that she's talking about it now, and she should, because this is not a thing that can be fought one-on-one. I even gave her my phone number so that she could talk to someone who knew what she was dealing with. I also gave her the number for the death hotline and told her she should contact a mental health professional. I never did hear from her again, but I really hope she went and got some help. Story 19. I picked up a guy from a gay bar and he was noticeably coming on to me. He then confessed that he was one of the founders of a very popular gaming company and offered me $2,000 to come up to his room. He also refused to leave my car unless I kissed his hand. Fun times. Story 20. I am not an Uber driver, but I have one that was told to me. This driver told me that he picked up his last fare for the day and it did not have a final destination. The dude gets in the car high yelling on the phone. The guy says, "Drive to Vegas here," and the guy tosses $500 at him. That is on top of the Uber fare, which apparently was surge pricing. So the guy drives him to Vegas. From Los Angeles, takes about 4 hours. The whole time the guy is talking, yelling on the phone to his mom. They get to Vegas, and he drops the dude off at some mansion where his mom is outside waiting to yell at him. Apparently, the guy forgot about giving him the cash because he tossed another few $100 at him, got out of the car, and split. Story 21? It's not a secret, but just one of many insane experiences. So I picked up a guy in a suit at around 6 p.m. on Tuesday near Venice, Cua. He told me to take him downtown, and per usual, I asked if he had a preferred route, and he said, "No, whatever is quickest." We get going, and the usual banter begins. "So how long have you been driving for Uber?" Me. "1 year or so. It's a great job." He says, "Oh, cool. Where do you stay at?" I answer, "In the valley." And he says, "Oh, nice, nice. So how long have you been driving for Uber?" I paused and kind of half smiled, thinking he was ducking with me. He wasn't, so I answered verbatim, 1 year or so. It's a great job." He goes, "Oh, cool. Where do you stay at?" This repeated 3 more times before I finally answered it differently, saying, "I just started. It's not for me." And him again replying, "Oh, cool. Where do you stay at?" I answered one last time the original way, but then finally, silence. By this point, I was on the 10 highway, stuck in rush hour traffic. I look in my rear view, and he is rubbing his head and hair profusely, like someone going through withdrawals. He took his suit jacket off and looked severely uncomfortable. I dialed 911 on my phone in case crap went down. He then out of nowhere yells in a deeper voice than earlier, "Damn." And I said, "Sir, is everything all right?" And he goes, "Where are we?" I said, "On the 10 headed downtown. Is that still okay?" He goes, "Yes." At this point, by the graces of the universe, we ended up moving pretty quickly through traffic. Then right before we exit off the 2 miles or so from his apartment, he yelled again, "Where are we?" I said, "Where?" "Sir, we're almost to your house. Is that still okay?" And he goes, "Yes, that's fine." Once we arrive, I pull up to drop him off and he gathers his stuff, opens the door and looks back in at me before walking away and in the most genuine, kind way says, "Have a great night. Watch out for crazy people." Honestly, one of the strangest, creepiest events ever. Subsequently, I bought a stun gun taser, and luckily so, as this was just the beginning of several crazy incidents. So damn glad I don't drive anymore. Story 22. Not my story, but my mom's. She does rides in San Diego, which is a city that loves its Navy and is where future SEAL go to buds. My mom was telling me one time that she gave a ride to a young man about 20 years old. He had been fighting to become a SEAL his whole life and ended up falling asleep on the last day or two of buds and getting dropped for the season. He was just crushed because he made it through everything before. And now he would have to wait before being able to enroll again and would be starting from scratch. Anyway, during the ride, he started to open up to my mom about his other passion, which was medicine, and she suggested he chase that dream instead because he came off as a very caring and devoted person. At the end of the ride, he asked her to step out of the car so he could give her a hug and a huge thanks for lending an ear and giving her honest opinion about the situation. He also left her his phone number so he could give her a call and let her know what he decided to do. A few days later, he gave her a call and said he had returned back home to Texas and would start taking courses to pursue a career in medicine. Story 23. Never overheard a juicy secret, but plenty of interesting packs. One time I had a group of 3 guys, probably around my age, mid-20s. They seemed nervous, avoided eye contact, and were pretty much silent from the moment they hopped in. I tried confirming the destination, asked how their night was going, etc., but only got muffled mumbling in return. As always, I worked the situation out in my head in a calm, rational manner. Something like, are these guys trying to rob me, jack my car? Did they just hit somebody? Am I an accessory? Do they have knowledge of the impending apocalypse? But as my paranoia routine winded down, I slowly started to realize what was going on. Between the beads of sweat, occasional jaw clenching, and finally, random giggle outbursts, they were tripping damn balls. Once it hit me, I called them out immediately and told them I was cool. They looked so relieved. I started blasting music, some Humphreys McGee, I do believe, and they just started geeking out by that point. Fun ride. At the end of the ride, the guy that sat up front tossed me a bag of shrooms. Good times. Story 24. I drove a lot of college-aged girls that were looking for, had a sugar daddy. They wanted 30-year-old men, no children, good job, willing to buy them lots of things, pay rent, bills. I had no idea this was so popular, but practically every girl that age that opened her mouth about a guy in my car went on about his age, job, and money. One girl even admitted to ducking someone with the same name and of the same age as her dad. Story 25. Oh man, something relevant to me and I'm late. I had someone get in my car, told me he's in his late 20s and that he's having sex with a girl who just recently turned 18. I awkwardly told him that's good for him, and he proceeded to tell me that it's not, that his life sucks, and everything he does to make himself happy doesn't work. He told me he watches vids of people end their life and wishes he had the courage they did to go through with it. He told me he's going to go to San Francisco and spend every last penny he has on vacation and just jump off the Golden Gate Bridge when he's done. I didn't really know what to say. When I dropped him off, I told him that I hope things start looking up, and he just said, they won't. They never do, and left. He also asked weird questions like, if I hit you, would you kick my ass? When I said I'd rather no one hit anyone, he said, dude, you'd whoop my ass, I'm a damn piece of crap. Hope he got help. Story 26. Not quite the question, but I feel very sorry for the Uber driver who had to drive my drunk ass home while my ex railed into me for changing the karaoke song he was going to sing. I was crying, and he was screaming while subtle jazz played through the speakers. Story 27. Not a driver, but a passenger. This is my story. I get picked up at around 2:15 a.m. after the bars. Older man, white Volvo station wagon. It's a pretty long drive, so I figure I'll talk with this guy. I ask him what credentials you have to be an Uber driver. Him background checks and all that. Me, probably for the best, eh? Wouldn't want any nutballs driving people around. Him, almost as if he didn't even hear what I said. Yeah, I'm a registered pedo offender, though. Me, Him proceeds to talk about it for 15 minutes straight. Me, him, as we get close to my house. Oh, I know that hill. I like to park there and watch the girls walk home from school. Me, me, as we pass my house. Yeah, just a few more blocks that way. Reported him to Uber. They said they would look into it. Never heard about it again. Story 28. I had an in-depth conversation about first times in the drive-thru at Jack in the Box with a girl who just lost her virginity in a one-night stand with a dude she had the hots on. I turned off the meter and added her on Snapchat. We became mega bros immediately. Story 29. Picked up a drunk guy on St. Patrick's Day. He was talking about his boyfriend and asked me if he should break up with him for being a money-grubbing escort. He then proceeded to tell me about the 2 dudes he was going to cheat on his boyfriend with that night. Just a weird set of conversations. Story 30. Not my story, but I had an Uber driver tell me this one, so I hope it counts by proxy. Uber driver George is doing Uber Pool one night in Austin where you pick up multiple people en route to the destination. First girl 1 gets in the car alone and sits in the back seat on the passenger side. Then a couple, guy and girl, comes, and there's not enough room for everyone in the back. So girl 2 sits behind the driver and guy sits up front. The 2 girls in the back start chatting and seem to be getting along well. Girl 1 asks what they're doing tonight, and girl 2 says, oh, me and my boyfriend Josh are going out to celebrate. Josh works at XX and just got a promotion. At this point, George notices Josh is crouching down in his seat and looking guilty. Then girl 1 says, that's funny. My boyfriend is also named Josh and works at XX. I wonder if they know each other. Then girl 2 starts tapping her boyfriend on the shoulder and bugging him to turn around to meet girl 1. At some point, Josh can't avoid the introduction anymore and is forced to turn around. He does so with a look of utter horror on his face, as it slowly dawns on both girls that they're dating the same Josh. Anyway, both girls start screaming and kick Josh out of the Uber. Not sure what happened after that, but you can bet Josh never took Uber pool again. Story 31. I had a couple breakup in my back seat. That wasn't awkward at all. Not one bit. The guy got so pissed off he just hopped out at a red light when we were still like 3 miles from where we were going. Story 32. We drove for about 6 months. Pick up an older couple middle of rush hour, middle of downtown, middle of a snowstorm, 3x multiplier, man on his cell and his wife in a rush. We needed to go north to get to their destination. We were about 5 blocks away. We are stuck in traffic and the wife tells me to make a left. I tell her, ma'am, if we go that way, that street doesn't go straight. It eventually curves and is going to take us south. It's going to take longer to get where we need to go. Lady says, I know where I'm going, just turn. After asking her like 4 times, I finally said okay and make the turn. A block or so later, the street curves and now we are going south the total opposite way. She then says, where the heck are you going? You are going the wrong way. You're trying to take advantage of us. I said, ma'am, I told you we shouldn't have turned. I asked you 3 times and you told me to turn. So I turned after telling you it was the wrong way. The lady starts just going ballistic, yelling and cussing and saying I was going the wrong way to rob her because of the multiplier. The husband was on the phone the whole time and says, let me call you back. Hangs up. Then says, we wouldn't be going the wrong way if you learned how to keep your damn mouth shut. Then he says, when will you learn to just shut the duck up? He then says, buddy, this isn't your fault. This is my fault. I married this woman 20 years ago and should have just put a gun in my mouth a long time ago. Then they just started going at it, the woman told him. Maybe I should beat her for you. And then they were just yelling back and forth. I finally get back on the right street, get them to their spot. It took over an hour ride, was about $70. And the whole time they were just yelling, I just raised the radio and let them go at it. They went at it the whole hour nonstop when I get them to their spot. They stop yelling mid-sentence and say in the most eerily calming way possible, you have a great day, thank you. It was crazy. Story 33. Not so much a dark secret as much as a potentially dark situation. Driving around waiting for pings, get one at a popular bar. Pull up and a young woman flags me down, gives me her name, asks for mine. I'm her ride. Easy enough. There's a guy with her. They're both quite drunk. She says goodnight to him and gets in the rear passenger side door. Homeboy isn't having it, decides he's coming with, starts trying to convince her. Despite her saying she has work early, wants to get to sleep, but he's not taking no for an answer. It's getting a bit weird as he's getting more and more pushy, aggressive about it, to a point she's clearly uncomfortable. I step out of the car and say over the top of the car, hey man, if she says you're not getting at the car, you're not getting in the car. He looks over at me with hate in his eyes. I'm a bit tense, not knowing this kid's deal. He slams the door, walks away, talking crap as he goes. Really? Talking crap as you walk away? What a hard ass. Get back in the car. Girl seems a little more sober after the experience and is shaken up over it. Take her back home. Make sure she gets in safe. Not as scary or as weird as it could have been, but the dude gave off a bad vibe, and I'm glad he took the hint and ducked off. Story 34. A few weeks back, I picked up a woman from Ute Arlington and drove her to DFW Airport. We got stuck in traffic heading to the airport, so we started chatting about this and that. We started talking about our jobs, and it turns out she was affiliated with an WNBA team from the Midwest. Her team had just beat the Dallas WNBA team by a sizable amount and was quite happy to share some info with me. She said she loved her job, traveling, doing something she loved, basketball, but she hated some of the players on the team. Divas, she called them. Said a few players treated her like crap and as a personal assistant, which she claimed she was not. As long as those Jeets keep winning, I can deal with them. They're such sore losers. She laughed at that. I just chuckled along with her. Afterwards, I admitted that I didn't even know Dallas had a one-bay team, let alone any other major city. She smiled and told me she hears that a lot in all the cities she visits. So, while not the craziest thing ever, I still thought she was a memorable rider. Kind of cool, I think. Story 35. Drove for Lyft in Denver, CO. Between jobs this summer. My 3rd PAX ever, and he was going to the airport. He said he was moving to Florida to get away from it all. But didn't have any luggage, not even a carry-on. I wasn't going to say anything about it, but my curiosity got the best of me. So, where's all your luggage? Did you ship everything ahead of time? He doesn't say anything right away, and just as I was deciding that perhaps I wasn't going to get an answer, I just had my friend call me a Lyft and he set up my flight. I just escaped from prison, but we look so much alike, his ID will work for me to travel. I was quiet the rest of the trip. Story 36. Picked up a girl who had to go to work across town. Her boyfriend and her were arguing in the parking lot as I was approaching. Girl gets in my car, and she's worried she's not going to get to work on time, and she would be fired if she was late. Get about a block away, and my phone rings. I answered and tried to get it off my Bluetooth stereo to no avail. The person on the other line was her BF, and he said he wanted to apologize about his GF and that I shouldn't listen to her because she was a crazy. She heard all of it and didn't say a thing. Very awkward. Finally get her to work, and she asks me to stay in the parking lot as she goes in and quits her job. She gets back a few minutes later, and on the way home tells me that her boyfriend once hit her arm in an argument and that he was going to be very mad at her, and she was worried about going back home, but to take her there anyway. Ended up dropping her off and calling non-emergency. But I have no clue if anything ever happened with it.